paradoxes of motivation and the 3 paradoxes of achievement. And then we'll do a little Q&A at the end. But as we've been saying, it is actually Q&A throughout. So don't worry about that. And another thing I think it's important to be aware, this is being recorded. So just be conscious of the fact that it is being recorded as well, please. Right, so a little bit about me. Some of you may already know me, but some not. I was born and bred in Dublin, Ireland, the little island off the other side of England, and that's my mum and dad. My father was a graphic designer, so that's a self-portrait of him when he was around 60, I think. Sadly, he died at 63. And my mum lived to the ripe old age of 94. She sadly died last year, but in a way, I'm pleased that she hasn't had to see the whole pandemic, because that would not have been nice at her age. And I used to be a chef. I was a chef for 10 years, and that's an actual painting of the kitchens of the Connaught Hotel in London, where I worked for a number of years. And that was really, really, really tough. And I got out of kitchens and cooking after 10 years and moved into training and development. And I had a whole career then in training and development since 1988. And my first job in hotels as a trainer was at the Waldorf Hotel in London, which was great fun. And then I worked in Business Link for London and moved out of hospitality after sort of 20 years in hospitality, 10 as a chef, 10 as a trainer. I moved out of hospitality and into more general businesses, working with lots of different businesses. Became a fellow of the CIPD and set up then, after Business Link for London, set up my own business, Inspired Working. And then 5 years ago, joined with my current business partner, Ali Gibbons. We've known each other for over 20 years. We really thought it would be great to collaborate. So we said, yeah, come on, let's build this business together. So we've built Talent for Performance and now have some fantastic clients like UK Parliament. We've worked with the Shangri-La Group, Corbin & King in restaurants in the UK, the Global Taylor & Francis Group, as well as numerous others. So that's a little bit about me. And I'd like to know a little bit about you. So could we start the poll? I'd just like to know what your current position is. With regards to where you're at. You're either currently not working, or maybe you're a sole trader independent, because I know there's a number of those in the IIBP, and a consultant coach, or a full-time employed in-house in a private organization or a not-for-profit, or working in an academic institution. Because on the last couple of webinars where we had lots of people, we also had a couple of people from academia. Oh, it's 50-50 at the moment. And 7 out of 7. Okay, we're all done. Right, consultant coach, 57%. And not currently working. Okay. Well, if you're not currently working, that can be a challenge if you want to work, or else maybe you're in a place where you don't need to. But if you are, I think these will also be very interesting from a motivational point of view and a getting things done point of view. Okay, so let's move on from that. We can close that poll. Thanks very much for participating and sharing in that. And we go on to the next slide. So what are the current challenges that you... Oh, is that moving on? Whoa. I think we need to close that poll. Is that just me? Did we close the poll? Did everybody get to see the poll results?
I did close the poll. Do you want me to share the results again?
Oh, sorry. No, but did everybody get to see the results?
Yeah, I saw the result.
Yeah, great. Okay, 57 independent. So, okay, so moving on to the next question. I'm wondering why that's not... There we go. Which is, what is your major challenge with regards to getting things done? If you could just pop a comment in the chat so we can see that. And I'd just like to know, what is your current challenge with regards to getting things done? Because a lot of these paradoxes have to do with that, obviously. And it'd be nice to see or hear what your current challenges are. See if we can then relate these to that. Procrastination. Yeah, okay, I get that. Intentions are good, but don't translate into action. Yes. The world is full of good intentions, but not enough action. Resources and time. Yeah, I really get there's a challenge with resources and time. Low motivation. Okay, that's interesting on low motivation. Yeah, because we are going to be talking about motivation. So sometimes, what is it that inspires us? Good. Okay. So what we'll then do is we'll move rapidly on to do a little bit of the recap on some of the brain science that I mentioned before. But this time it's about understanding motivation a bit. So as I mentioned before last time, you got your brain, you've got the brain stem, which is this green here illustrated in green. And that's basically our automatic nervous system. It's, reaction, breathing, heartbeat, that sort of stuff. Fast response. But it's interesting to note how actually our amygdala is down here, very close to the brainstem, and also part of our emotional center, the cingulate cortex. And we also have then our reward center. But the amygdala is an interesting one because it's actually not only the storage of places where it's like fight or flight response, but it's actually where you store memories of danger, memories of a threat response. So it's actually a place where memories are held as well as being able to go, okay, alert, get alert, we need to do something here because there's a danger. And then the ventral striatum is also a very complex group of neurons and connections around reward. And it's very complex, but the simple way of thinking of it is as the reward center. So we've got thinking, prefrontal cortex, where we do our thinking, which is just this tiny little bit at the front. It's only a couple of millimeters thick, so it's a little sheath over the front. And we've got the amygdala and the ventral striatum. And if we look at those, we can see that the prefrontal cortex is about emotional regulation. And that means understanding, memorizing, remembering, making decisions, and inhibition. So inhibition to do something else when you should be focusing on the main thing that you're doing. Inhibition sometimes to go, well, I want to be able to lose weight, so I need to exercise more. And I'm going to inhibit sitting in front of the couch watching TV or eating that second biscuit. And all of these things take energy because the prefrontal cortex is very, very energy hungry. And it's important to be aware that in some of the research, not all of it, but in some of it, it's shown that doing a lot of this stuff, understanding, memorizing, and remembering, making decisions, can actually deplete your energy. It's currently open for debate, but I still think it's a useful metaphor to be able to say, right, if you're overdoing this stuff, or if you're very tired, your ability to use your prefrontal cortex gets massively reduced. That's a fact. And then the energy goes down and down so that you're less able to do those key things, those what we call executive functions. The ventral striatum can give you a boost. It can give you a boost with some dopamine when the reward system is clear, and then you get curious and you get motivated to do something because you anticipate a reward. So it's not the pleasure from a reward, it's the anticipation of a reward, which is really interesting. And sometimes the reward itself isn't necessarily as rewarding as you would like, but the anticipation of a reward creates dopamine in the system. And also, of course, that can boost your energy a bit. But the amygdala can actually respond to threat and safety, and that can actually deplete your energy, especially if it's chronic. And I think during the pandemic, we're experiencing a lot of stress. I think generally speaking, the threshold of stress that we have is very high. So it's quite a low threshold now because it doesn't take much to fill us over, be full of so much stress that it begins to overflow. And that's when things go out of balance. Or our behavior can flip. And we're going to talk about flip behaviors in a moment. So these all interact, right? It's not necessarily a loop that goes in one direction. They're all interacting all of the time. And I'd like to refer back to these, especially the amygdala flips, when we're talking about some of the paradoxes. So let's talk about the paradoxes of motivation, exploring a balanced approach to utilizing your energy. So that's what this is going to be focused on. So let's first look at the paradox of motivation itself, how to deal with self-motivation and stress. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Harrison paradoxes, Dr. Dan Harrison developed these paradoxes with a view to being two things, like a paradox being two things that may seem contradictory or be opposites, but in fact are both true. And in the Harrison paradoxes, they're behavioral paradoxes where there may be two behaviors, which seem to be opposite, but in fact may not only be both true and valid, but when they come together form something synergistic. However, when they're out of balance, then you only have one of these behaviors that can lead to unintended consequences. So let's look at some of these unintended consequences. For example, if you're self-motivated, and this is for the people who are maybe procrastinating or not so high on self-motivation. So I can see someone just had to leave. Okay, no problem. So the self-motivation is the drive to achieve including taking initiative, knowing what needs to be done and doing it, wanting a challenge, willing to try something that's difficult, and being enthusiastic about your goals, i.e. you know what goal you want to achieve, and this activity that you need to do is exciting for you. It's like, great, this is not only doing X, but it's helping me to achieve Y in the long run. So the other part is stress management, the tendency to be relaxed and manage stress when it occurs. So if we have high self-motivation, but low stress management, we'll get into stressed achievement. And a lot of people operate like this. And I'd just be curious, what do you think are the unintended consequences if this carries on for a long time? What can happen if we're living in the stressed achievement box and not managing our stress? Oh, you're all very quiet. I'd love to hear your thoughts. No, you work well only under stress. Yes, some people, poor performance later. Thanks. And you work well only under stress is an interesting one. We can get very addicted to stress and then only wait for the stress to build up to a degree before we actually do something. That's the model of procrastination. Not being able to feel the happiness of achievement. Yeah, you can actually end up burning out. That's the thing. You can end up in stressed achievement, get very frazzled and burn out. And we don't see this very often, I must say. It does show up, but we don't see it very often. If we're very good at stress management and we're low on motivation, we don't like challenges, we don't really take initiative, and we're not very excited about goals, we'll end up in what we call tranquil inertia. That's where we're just like, you know, nothing much happening. And we don't tend to see many people with this score at work because they don't tend to last very long in the workplace. And what we're really looking for here is poised achievement. And ultimately, if you're low on both, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody in stressed underachievement, they probably wouldn't be in the workplace. In fact, they may be not well. That might be a reason for being in that stressed underachievement, in a burnout. So what's interesting to note about the paradoxes, and I'm going to illustrate it here, but then I'll just mention it on the other ones, is that we have flip behaviors when we're under stress. So a passive flip is if I'm in stressed achievement for a long time, the stress will build up. And what actually happens, we get a flip response where achievement creates burnout and we end up in tranquil inertia. So that's not a good place to be. So when we get stressed, we flip in. And some of you may recognize this, so that you actually have, a very, very busy week. And then what happens is you come to the weekend and before you know it, you just want to, you've got all these things you need to do at the weekend and you can like, oh, I'd just rather sit and read a book, or not even read a book, just watch some television, anything that I don't need to do anything. So we can have that if we're in stress achievement, that in the evening or at the weekend, we may collapse into that. So we only have two types, most often stressed achievement or poised at the workplace. Sorry, could you just say anything about that? Do you want to say something about that? I'm not sure what I mean, what you mean.
As you mentioned, the tranquil inertia as well as the stressed underachievement is uncommon at the workplace. So
Yes.
do we see only the top two?
We tend to, yes. In fact, the average where we see people, I can't move this across because it's in part, the average is here in between. We tend to see around a 4 to 6 on a score of stress management. But when it gets down to 2 or 3, then we know we got 4, 3, we got problems. But it's normal. And then people who are at a 4 scoring around here need to do something about their stress. And then this is on the right side. And then, they're coping, but they could still do something to improve their stress. And then here's where you're managing both together. Yeah, so that's a good point. But likewise, and again, I don't see this very often because we don't see people stuck in tranquil inertia. But if you're in tranquil inertia, you build up, and this is maybe happening in a bit in procrastination or people who lack motivation, that suddenly you go like, oh my God, now I need to do it. The deadline's appearing tomorrow. I've got to be able to get everything together and just dive in there. And then you get into stressed achievement to try and achieve what it is that you need to achieve. So the key thing here is to understand we've got the paradoxes, but if you're out of balance under stress, you'll flip into the opposite trait. You'll flip into the aggressive out of balance trait. So any questions about that before we move on to the next one? Okay, so let's move on. The paradox of self. So this is really fascinating. When I first came across this, I really was very interested in it. And it has quite a profound effect on people's well-being in the short term and in the long term. So how do you manage self-esteem and self-improvement? The tendency to like oneself. If I've got high self-acceptance here, this is what we call the dynamic trait on this side. It's in red. It's how you act in the world. I like myself. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm okay. And then you got self-improvement, which is, oh, I need to get better. I really enjoy wanting to get better because life is about improving. But if we're very high on self-acceptance, but don't need to get better, it's like, who, me? I don't need to improve. That can come across as defensive. So when I first saw this, I was really intrigued to see that people who are defensive are not necessarily being difficult or trying to be defensive or upsetting. They're just going like, I don't need to get better. Who are you to tell me to get better? I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. They have this notion in their head that everything's okay. However, we often find people in this tends to be the main quadrant that we see people in, which is self-critical. So very much, I need to get better, but I'm not good enough. And it's almost like a lot of people are fearful of, if they don't continuously beat themselves into self-improvement by being critical and being angry with themselves and pushing themselves, they'll become arrogant. It's almost like this behavior is fearful of this behavior, when in fact, it's about having both. So that you can actually be self-aware and say, I'm okay, I'm doing good. And yes, I've made a mistake in this area. This didn't get done or that didn't get done. So what can I learn from that? What can I do to improve? Which is actually a growth mindset. So both of these can lead us to a fixed mindset, actually, if you've read any of the work by Carol Dweck. And then this doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And this is often a difficult quadrant to be in. If you're internally contradicted, you're not happy in yourself and you're not really necessarily able to improve or know what to do to improve. And that can be a bit of a stuck place and often needs some external support. So then the paradox of power, the last of the three on motivation, how you approach helping others and asserting your own needs. So this one is about being able to say, how assertive are you? That's the dynamic trait. The tendency to put forward your own personal wants and needs. And how helpful you are, the tendency to respond to others' needs and assist or support others in achieving their goals. And what we find again is that we don't have so many people up in assertive, but if we're very high assertive, low on helpful, people will see us as dominating. It's all about me, me, me. It's what I want, what I need. You, I don't really care that much about that. And that can come across as dominating. And people don't often recognize that that is their behavior. So when we have to give them feedback using the Harrison approach, it's really interesting for them to go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that that was happening. I didn't realize that that's how I was coming across. However, the most common that we see is people being very helpful and not very assertive. And that means that they get to self-sacrificing. They tend to do stuff almost to the degree that they burn out. And then what happens, as I mentioned before, if you're here a lot in your natural behavior, stress builds up, and then you flip into dominating, and you become the very thing that you don't want. So the balance is to be able to say, right, let's go for mutual help. This is what I need, and here's what I'm prepared to do for you, and then this is what I need, and this is what I'm doing for you, so that there's this to and fro. And it's interesting that when a manager or a leader is self-sacrificing, they'll actually say yes to things that they shouldn't be saying yes to. And sometimes they can overcommit the team that they're leading and go, yeah, to their boss. They'll go, yeah, or to their client. Yeah, we'll do this. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll be helpful. We'll be super helpful. We'll help you out. And then the team are going like, we don't have the resources. We don't really know what we can do here. And they're the ones that then suffer. And needs avoidance is an interesting one because that sometimes comes up when people are an independent contributor. They're doing their own thing. And they're just not really paying attention to anybody else. They're just going like, I don't have any needs because I'm just doing my own thing. And I don't really need to look after anybody else because I'm doing my own thing. So sometimes people who are very independent workers doing an independent job fall into this quadrant. So any questions? I'd love to hear. So, okay, I've got a couple there. So we have two types of. Is it similar to the collaborative model? That's a good question. The emphasis on the collaboration is the paradox of delegation, which you might be thinking of, where there's a balance between being authoritative and making all the decisions and being collaborative, which is making decisions with others. So if that's what you mean, then there is a slight difference. Can defensive people be mistaken for arrogant and egoistic? Absolutely. Yes, completely. That's the whole point. Most people who come across as arrogant or egoistic are in fact in that upper left quadrant. They're, I'm good. Me? Need to change? Need to improve? I'm already perfect. They might not say that, but it's interesting coaching people like that. So when we do this, we often have it as part of our coaching programs. And when someone is in the defensive quadrant, you go, okay, I need to be appropriate in my approach for this. And then some people go, oh my goodness, I hadn't really realized that that would be how I come across. And in fact, there's something else that's interesting on that one, which I didn't mention, and I love to mention. So if we're very self-critical, what happens is that we have a behavior, it can build up, and then we flip into being defensive. And how that shows up is, let's say I'm very self-critical, and I'm thinking like, oh no, there's only whatever 6 people on this course, or something didn't go wrong with this, something went a bit wrong with the slides. And then someone goes, oh, David, those slides, they weren't really great on that webinar. And I'll go like, huh, what do you mean? I worked so hard, because I've already beaten myself up about it. Now I'm not giving you permission to beat me up on it. And it's as if you've punched me on my own bruises. So I've been beating myself up. You then punch me on my bruise. And I go like, ow, there's no need for that. I've already hurt myself, thank you. So then they see that as defensive behavior, which is interesting. If we're not dominating, it may be difficult to get the work done sometimes. Okay, now that's really interesting perspective, because it's not about being dominating. It's about being appropriately assertive and helpful so that you get mutual help. So this is the thing about what I love about the Harrison is it gives you some great vocabulary to make very fine-tuned distinctions around what's going on here. So if someone is being very assertive and that's all they're doing, and assertive don't forget, in Harrison, it's not about telling other people what to do. It's the tendency to put forward your own personal wants and needs. If I'm in this quadrant, I will come across as dominating because I'm not really being helpful to anybody. It's only about me. Where here, I'm being assertive. In fact, I'm being very assertive and I'm being helpful. Does that make sense, Timson? Or Anuba as well. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Great. Being dominant a personality trait? Okay. We tend to look at this and all of this stuff around personality and behavior through the lens of behavior rather than personality. Because if you look at personality, you got Jungian models and you got other models, the big 5 and all those other big models, and they're all valid. I'm not going to, get into a debate about them. But we prefer to distinguish behavior because then we can talk about it. And when we talk about it, I can show you some unintended consequences of your behavior. And it's easier for you then to go, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm going to change my behavior. So a lot of the time we're coaching people who are self-sacrificing to say, look, you need to assert yourself a bit and assert your needs a bit and go, this is about mutual help. It's not about becoming a dominating, egoistic, arrogant, whatever. Because when we're here, if we're very super helpful and we're out of balance here, we tend to make a virtue of being helpful. Oh, I'm such a good person. I'm so helpful. And those nasty assertive people, they're just dominating. They're really unpleasant and unhelpful. So I'm not going to become like that. I'm going to stay a nice, good person. But we need to reframe assertive then as saying it's not about being dominating. It's about being in balance so that you get mutual help. I hope that makes sense. Any questions on that? Or any further questions? How can a trainer coach use the paradox to convey the point of being positively assertive without being overbearing? Yeah, well, we're having a fantastic conversation about this actually at the moment with regards to coaching and management, in that if there's not mutual help, and if I'm a trainer and I don't say, look, you need to do this, especially at the moment with pre-course work for webinars and stuff like that, or online trainings, I'm not going to let you fail. I'm not going to let you not learn. I'm going to ensure that I I'm assertive with you so that you do whatever you need to do, change your behavior, because it's going to be good for you. And I'm not, not on my watch. I'm not going to let you get away with not learning. That's the sort of approach I take. And then you have to, don't be overbearing is all about, the tonality that you use, being a bit jokey about it, or helping not to come across as harsh or, aggressive, I suppose. And in fact, I am relentlessly persistent with my clients in lots of super friendly ways. Here's a friendly reminder. Okay, here's another friendly reminder. And then if they don't respond to that, I go, come on, let's have a phone call. And then they'll have maybe 3 or 4 messages from me on their voicemail. And then eventually they go, oh, yeah, I really need to do this. I'm really sorry. I've got a situation like that at the moment, and that's the need avoidance. So, okay, moving on. The paradoxes of achievement, right? So a lot of what we were talking about there was your own energy and how you utilize your own energy. Now we're going to talk about how you approach getting stuff done. And the first one I want to talk about is the decision approach, right? The paradox of decision approach, how you use logic and intuition when making decisions. So in this time, we're going to say there's a paradoxical balance between analytical, which is the tendency to logically examine facts and problems, and intuitive, the tendency to use hunches to help you make decisions. And if we're very analytical and not very intuitive, we can be laser logical. Now, laser logical is amazing. We've got lots of engineering clients, and anybody who's been through that sort of engineering, fault finding, that's what they do. They do analysis, and most of them are completely laser logical. But the trouble with being laser logical is that if you have too much information or not enough information, because laser logical people will never have enough information, right? They'll always want some more data. Give me some more data so I can analyze it. But the world isn't like that. If anything, nowadays we have too much data. And that's when you need to start using your intuition. So they can get stuck in analysis paralysis. However, if you're very intuitive and not very analytical, you can be coming across as non-logical. Oh, David, why did you decide that? Well, it just felt right. Okay, yeah, but all the consequences that have now happened are this, this, and this. We need to now back up and be able to report on why you made that decision. And go like, it's just because I felt like it. So actually being non-logical means that you can't necessarily back up your thinking. So what you need is logical intuition, where you're using both logic and intuition. You can use your hunches and your experience and back it up with data. And that's a very powerful way to make decisions. And in fact, at the moment, more than ever, this is a requirement because there's a lot of ambiguity out there. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. And sometimes the only way we can make a decision is using our intuition. I'm having to use my intuition more and more. And then you do get some people who are disinterested in decisions. They're just like not really participating in the decision-making process. They're neither analytical nor using their intuition. And that might be they're in a non-management role, or they can't be bothered, or it's just not part of their agenda to be making decisions. It's just like, I'm the doer of the doing, so I just do the doing. Tell me what to do. And they might be disinterested in decisions. So think about, if you're going to be doing something, are you just using analysis and laser logic, analytical, or are you using intuition, or are you using both? Because only using intuition can also lead you into the trap of falling into your biases. All the rationales that you have from your background, your culture, whatever it is, that will say, this is the way the world is. Well, maybe it's not that way. It's certainly changing rapidly around us. And therefore, sometimes we need to think, okay, what's the data really saying? I don't know if, I believe it's happening in India as well, but around the world, we're now having leaders telling us stuff that it's just like not true. And it's demonstrably not true. That's certainly happening here in the UK and in America. It's really bizarre. So we have to be able to go, okay, hold on a second. Let's really look at the facts here. And sometimes looking at the facts is tough. It's uncomfortable and unpleasant. So again, you get the flip behaviors, which you need to be aware of with that. So the paradox of innovation. How do you approach trying new things and overcoming obstacles? Because getting stuff done is also about saying, right, how well am I doing? Am I being persistent enough? And am I trying new things enough? Because the tendency to be tenacious despite encountering significant obstacles means that you've got that drive, that grit to carry on doing something even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not looking good. However, there's also a balance to be had, because if you just carry on carrying on, you're going to end up in stubborn persistence, right? If you're persistent without experimenting, you get stubborn persistence. And that's not very healthy, because then you're sort of denying yourself success because you're just carrying on with something that isn't working. And if we're always experimenting, though, and we talked about this on one of the previous webinars, I believe, where we looked at exploiting and exploring, you've got too much experimenting, and then you end up not finishing because you're going, oh, we could try this. Oh, let's try that. And a lot of leaders fall into that trap by finding themselves in a place where they try a new management approach or a new strategic approach, but they don't see it through. And then they read another book and go, oh, we've been doing this for 6 months, not getting any results. Come on, let's do this over here. And hey, everybody, we're going over there. And that can lead to non-finishing and can lead to a lot of disruption in businesses. So what we want is inventive, where we're being persistent and experimenting and being persistent without getting into stubborn persistence or non-finishing. And then basically someone who's low on both of those, well, they're pretty unresourceful, right? They're not persistent enough and they're not experimenting enough. They usually need some coaching. Again, we don't see many of those in the workplace because they don't tend to be in the workplace. And then the last one of the 3 paradoxes that I wanted to discuss before we go into Q&A is how you deal with organization, how you deal with adaptability and creating organizational change. So this is the paradox of organization, and it's about being how organized are you and how well do you organize things, how much structure do you bring to your work, the tendency to place and maintain order in an environment or a situation, and flexible, the tendency to easily adapt to change. So if we're very high on organized but low on flexible, we can be rigidly organized. It's just like everything has to be this way, no other way, only this way. And that can be very rule bound. It can upset a lot of customers and colleagues because there's no flexibility in your thinking. And it can lead to a lot of resistance to change. Where if we're very flexible, we can end up being scattered, where people are going like, well, what does David really think? Because he's so flexible, he'll go this way today and that way tomorrow. And the next thing he's going up there and then down there. And it's like, where is he? And that can also lead to, in a leader, their teams being in disarray. Because if the leader is leaving lots of things at the last minute and ducking and diving and changing and chopping and changing, the team can get very, very stressed and not know what to do and be left picking up all the pieces. So what we want is we want to have flexible organizing, where you can be flexible enough to adapt, and yet you can be ordered as well. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lewin's model of change, which goes from having something being frozen. Let's say, imagine a cube of ice that's frozen, and then you melt it. So you unfreeze, but then in order to have a good change program, you have something that's solid, you break it or loosen it so that it begins to unfreeze, but then you need to refreeze it in a new shape. So let's say you have a sphere, you fill that with water, and then you got your new shape. Unless you can reorganize in that new format, your change program probably won't work. And that's a lot to do with this. It's that ability to be flexible and bringing order to the new order. So, any questions on any of that? We've had a very rapid talk through all of those paradoxes. Devika, you were saying, like, how are you going to do 6 paradoxes in 45 minutes? Well, there you go. So any questions? Because we've now got some time I've got a couple of slides I want to wrap up with, but other than that, let's have a bit of an open conversation. I mean, feel free to switch off turn on your microphones. We're only a small group. Very happy to have an open discussion. Oh, how can anybody be trained using hunches or intuition? That's really interesting. We do come across that, because especially with engineers, and there's some great stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman. The Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow is really useful. as a background resource to the research around thinking fast and thinking slow. And helping someone is helping them to recognize that their experience has value, one, so they've got experience, but also to be sensitive enough to be conscious of the sensations in their body. So mindfulness can really help with that. Being still enough to say, okay, what feelings do I get in my chest or in my gut, or do I get a certain feeling? It tends to be intuition, tends to show up in feelings for some people. But for me now, a lot of it comes up as a little sort of like, I just allow myself to relax for a moment, go into a calm place, and I visualize different scenarios. And my mind can very rapidly visualize, okay, if we do this, what happens? Or if we do that, what happens? And it can sort of imagine futures and possible futures. And then I tap into those. And I also help people to be quiet enough to listen to the quiet little voice inside that goes, you know, you really need to do this. But if it's all very noisy and you're deep in your analysis and you're ignoring those little voices, then those little suggestions that come out, then you're denying your intuition. Does these paradoxes change as per culture of the organization? Yes, absolutely. I wish to be assertive in my organization. Okay, it looks like rude behavior. So, it's about the balance. So, you know, Satnam, it's a really good question, and it's about the balance, because it's how you frame becoming more assertive. And it's about how you declare your own needs, because most people want you to be successful, right? We all want our colleagues to be successful. But if my colleague is helping me, and this can go at home as well, right? With partners in married relationships. If one of the partners is doing all of the work, bringing up the kids and doing the washing and the shopping and the work and bringing in a full-time job income as well, you go like, oh, wait a second, that's not very balanced. So that can then lead to flip behavior, right? I think you'd be aware of that. So then it's about having a conversation to say, okay, at the moment, I'm up to here and I'm finding that that's really tough. If you were able to do this for me, that would be really great. It would really help me to, or if you got your team to do X so that our team can be more effective, or could you give us some of your resource to help us out? It's about having that conversation and declaring what you're doing, and that you're reaching your limit of capacity. How can you come to an agreeable way of being mutually helpful? I hope that's helpful.
Yes, that is. But I just have one question here, especially in the time of pandemic and when people are working from home, most people, and they are not very used to working from home and managing so many things.
Sure.
So one challenge that we face here is that people say that they're not able to switch off from work, and if they are assertive, even if they are, inventive in finding ideas, other people or the seniors find them, non-compliant, or not very hardworking, or non-responsive people. So they say that we want to be assertive, but then our seniors look at us as, being non-cooperative, or so I guess what you wanted, what the answer that you gave is pretty appropriate, that it's about the balance. But yes, the challenge is that, how do you assert yourself in an environment which looks at it not assertive but as non-compliant, or non-responsive. I
Yeah,
am not sure if.
look, I'm going to be honest. This isn't easy stuff, right? Especially when you have a particular mindset within the top management. As Raghavan has just said as well, if top management is authoritarian in nature, they'll prevent collaboration. If the top management is dominating in nature, they're going to prevent people. It's difficult. So there has to be some way of helping people to recognize, especially senior leaders, to recognize that there are capacity issues. Because one of the things that I'm still fascinated by is that this working from home thing, I've got an office, it's organized, I've got my workspace, I've got my resources around me. I'm used to working from home every Monday and Friday during normal times. and my wife works from home as well. In her office, she travels a lot, but we're set up that way. But if I had to be working from home at my dinner table with a laptop, with the kids running around and all the other domestic stuff hanging around me, then that's really, really tough. And that's fine. That's where we're finding a lot of people are finding it extremely difficult if they don't have a home office to be able to do this work without distraction, right? Because it's very distracting. And I think leaders need to start being conscious of this. This is not easy stuff. In fact, we're writing some papers at the moment around compassionate leadership, which is all this ability to be able to be vulnerable, understand the vulnerability of others, and be compassionate, because otherwise people are going to burn out and they're just going to get ill, and then you won't have any resource at all. So I really hear that it's tricky. I hope that some of that helps. Good. So does top management, yeah, we've answered that one, Raghavan, I agree. Any other questions from anybody? We've still got a few minutes left. It's nice to have a bit of a Q&A. How flexible organizing can be helpful in coaching? Yeah, coaches can tend to be very flexible. You know, we would go over here, we were flexible to the client's needs, and I've always been a bit like on the super flexible side and not so organized. So I've had to learn how to bring organization. And in fact, during this time of the pandemic, with a lot of stuff around, I don't know if you do any training online, we're doing a lot of training online now. You have to be really organized. You know, there's so much more prep that we need to do. There's so much that we need to give people to do beforehand. You need to be super organized with regards to planning how you're going to interact with the group. So on a one-to-one basis, you also need to be really organized to say, if I'm going to serve my coachee, I need to be structured and organized in the way that I approach them in order to help them achieve their goal. Now, you use a coaching approach, and it'll be, you know, depending on what sort of coaching you do. If it's pure, you know, International Coaching Federation type stuff where you don't tell them to do anything at all, you still need to be organized in your thinking about the sorts of questions you're going to ask. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, any other questions? There's a couple of people we haven't heard from at all yet. It'd be nice to hear from you. Feel free to open your mic. Francis, if you're there, or Santosh. Working online requires 1.6 times the work for better delivery. Your thoughts? Raghavan, could you just say a little bit more about that?
What we normally say is that when you're face to face, if I have to deliver for a minute, I prepare for 3 minutes. But in a online, if I have to deliver for a minute, I have to prepare for 6 minutes.
That's an interesting statistic. Is there research showing that, or is that purely your own anecdotal research?
It is more like the research that has been done in the past maybe 4 or 5 months, the way the facilitators have felt about it.
Right.
Because it takes a lot of effort to do a 1 minute delivery online.
Yeah.
So I just want to understand you, because you do so much of online.
Thank you. It's really useful. I'm going to share that with my business partner, Ali Gibbons, because we are going like, oh my goodness, this is taking so much time to think things through analytically each step of the way, and what needs to be done beforehand, what's possible to do beforehand, what happens if they don't do it beforehand, can you still mop up during the session? Communicating with line managers so that the line managers speak to their people before the course and say, have you done your homework, and what outcomes are you going to have? Because that's often missing. So yeah, thanks for that. It's actually 6 times more, 6 times 6 for 1 on online, when it's only 3 for 1 for face to face. And also what we're noticing, and you know, when you're face to face, I think with coaching, one-to-one coaching, it still works, but with face to face, when you're doing it with a group compared to doing it online, it's really tough. Look, I can't see any of you. None of you are showing your screens, so I can't see any of your body language. I don't even know if you're there. And you know, okay, generate a bit of chat, but that, you know, I've got used to it, but my brain doesn't like it. It doesn't like it at all. It can, and for a lot of people, it's really, really stressful. So stressful that they can't function properly. It's actually a paradox that the company now wants the quality to be the same face-to-face through web. Yes. How to convey to leadership that this is not the case. Well, okay, there's an interesting debate around this, Santosh. We're exploring how online training can be better than face-to-face. Now, it's a belief we're holding, okay, because we want to hold that belief, because, you know, holding it.
But my experience in last 3 months when I have conducted the program over web has been different, as a short 80-minute, 90-minute program is not delivering the same results as a face-to-face 2-hour or a 3-hour program can convey, as well as help the trainer understand the participants far more easily, and maybe sometimes pick up their facial expressions, their body language, to deliver something more than what was expected. Whereas in a web-based program, we are unable to do that.
I totally agree, 100%. We've got to change our whole approach. Fundamentally, it's a fundamentally different. I thought, it's just online, you know, and now it's not. It's a fundamentally different approach. There has to be pre-learning that the person must commit to get some content into their head, and then the online bit is a discussion about the topic. How are you going to apply it? What about this? What about that? It's contextualizing the learning in an interaction. So we're finding, this is our finding, I don't know, you know, I'd be interested to know what yours is. We're having to shift the whole mindset around online delivery so that the interactive bit, because it's so limited online, has to be interaction with people about stuff rather than trying to deliver content. What are your thoughts on that, Santosh?
Yeah, I agree. However, the experience has not been so good so far. Even though we have modified the program to be web-based instead of a PPT-driven program or a face-to-face program, we have used more videos.
Right.
But it seems that participants are, because they are working from home, most of them actually only respond when spoken to, and
Yes.
we have a great difficulty in understanding whether the participant is listening or he's doing something else, and that is a big challenge in these web-based programs when we are talking of developmental programs where it is not technical, it is more of soft skills or managerial programs.
I totally and 100% agree with you. It's so different.
It's very easy for a technical program to judge, and people do listen when we are training engineer on some particular concept of his own field. He's very attentive, but when it comes to management training, the same person gets switched off.
Yeah. And this is where the learner needs to understand that it's different as well. Because I think a lot of learners are still coming to a webinar and thinking, oh, it's just like a workshop. I'll just come on and, you know, sit there and it'll be done to me. And it's okay for me to look at my email while the tutor is speaking, and it's okay for me to do other jobs, and, you know, I can switch off my camera. So, you know, are they even present psychologically and mentally? And that's the bit that's actually very, very challenging, is how can we set this up so that the learner knows that they need to put in a lot of effort as well. More effort than before, more effort than just showing up in a workshop. You know, managing all the distractions, being focused, staying with the learning.
Yes,
it's very tough.
I agree to that.
Yeah. So we're all on this journey, Santosh. We're all on this journey. It's really quite fascinating to see where we're all evolving and having to change and learn and grow, because even if things ever get back to any form of non-pandemic normality, whatever that'll be, I think a lot of businesses will still demand this sort of online stuff.
True.
Blended is going to be the future from now on. But I agree. I love being in front of people directly, because you can read the room, and especially when it's difficult strategic meeting facilitation, that is so difficult online, because you can't read the expressions. So I'm aware of time. I've just got a couple of more slides to go. Thank you very much for your interaction. But I want to leave you just with a couple of more slides, and that is wrapping up. It'd be good just to hear from you what your key insights are and takeaways. What did you learn from this? It was a very small group, but hopefully we'll get a lot of people to watch it on the recording. But I'd just be curious to know what sort of things you are taking away. Pop it in the chat or tell me. It's easiest if you pop it in the chat. Any takeaways, any key insights that you've had from this program so far, or this webinar so far? Sometimes there's a bit of a lag when people type before it actually all points. An interesting way of understanding the paradoxes. Good. Thanks, Satnam. Yeah, there we go. Staying in balance. Yeah. Putting into practice the paradoxes of motivating my coaching assignments. Yeah, it's a very useful tool to consider. And you know, it's very nice because most people, when you draw one of the paradoxes just on a sheet of paper, you know, 4x4, I even get people to draw it themselves online. If we're doing a remote session, they can go, oh yeah, I can see I'm more like this, I'm less like that. I can see that sort of behavior. So it becomes a very powerful way of helping motivate change, because people can say, oh, right, the ideal is to bring these things into balance. Yeah. The flip effect makes it much more sense now. Good. Yes, absolutely. Great. Okay. So in summary, you know, the paradoxical mindset, what we've been talking about for all these 3 webinars, is both and, not either or. It's a way of being able to go, okay, I need to think about being both self-motivated and managing my stress. I need to think about both, you know, being self-accepting, I'm okay the way I am, and improving myself. And paradoxical leadership is a lack of balance, is important to consider. A lack of balance can lead to limited behavior, because if you're out of balance, you've only got one set of behaviors to go with. They'll probably not get you the results you want, and then you'll flip into the opposite rather than developing that opposite trait. And it can lead to poor decisions, especially in teams where the whole team is out of balance. So it's really about looking at how to have that mental and behavioral flexibility around healthy self-esteem, being both accepting of yourself and willing to improve, poised achievement, being both motivated and managing your stress, mutual help, being both assertive and helping others, logical intuition, using logic and your intuition, and inventive, which is both being persistent and experimenting, and finally, flexible organizing, where you're being flexible and being organized. So they're the things I'd like to just leave you with. And once again, how are you feeling? Any key word that you're feeling on a Saturday afternoon as you contemplate these paradoxes? Oh, I'm aware of time, so I need to wrap up. Just drop those in the line as I go through the very last slide. It'd be nice to see how you're feeling. The last slide is really just some additional resources. You can get free performance improvement resources page on our website, talentforperformance.co.uk. Feel free to go there. You've also got a sign up page for our T4P list, the mailing list. I send out something usually every 2 weeks or so. Follow, connect on LinkedIn, quite happy for you to do that. And we've got an uplift program, which is a sort of review of where you're at, what your pre-pandemic strategy was, where you feel you need to go, and what sort of pivots you need to make in order to be able to, you know, get through this rapidly changing environment. So there's an uplift program. It's also, you'll see some more on the website about that under the resources tab. And then finally, we've got a performance potential program, which can be run online and therefore remotely anywhere in the world, developing a growth mindset and the habits and behaviors of success. And again, it's a lot to do with applying paradoxical thinking and behaviors. So thank you very much. That's pretty much me wrapped up.
Thank you, sir, and thank you everyone for attending. And hopefully we all learned something. I think I learned quite a bit about paradoxes throughout these sessions. So hopefully we'll work with David over something else soon. But otherwise, I think we're wrapped up from our side as well.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, David. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.